Hello and welcome to Dad and Swebb Talk Sports. I'm Swebb,
And I'm Dad.
and we are the dad and daughter duo talking about all of our favorite sports moments from the week. And there were quite a few this week, Dad.
Yes, there were.
Some big ones.
Yes, there were. I didn't get much sleep this week. These games running too late, Swebb.
This week is going to be even better because we've got the start of the NBA season. We've got the Yankees in the World Series. I think this week's going to be incredible.
It should be. We'll see. We'll see.
All
You know
right.
my philosophy. Just go game by game, Swebb.
Game by game. And you know what? During the ALCS, we weren't just going game by game. We were going inning by inning and pitch by pitch. Okay.
Pitch by pitch is right.
So let's start with the Yankees. They've made it to the World Series for the first time since 2009. They will be taking on the Los Angeles Dodgers. So you've got number one in the East versus number one in the West. The Yankees obviously won their series against the Cleveland Guardians 4-1. Late game heroics in game 5 of the series with a game-winning home run by Juan Soto in the top of the 10th inning, which was incredible. And the Dodgers beating the Mets in a 7-game series 4-2, but winning 10-5 in that last game. So this is the matchup that I think everyone could have hoped for besides New Yorkers. But I think Major League Baseball is pretty happy because when you think about it, these are the top two teams, one on the East Coast, one on the West Coast. You've got the two MVPs, one in the AL, one in the NL. Very similar records and stats from both Aaron Judge and Shohei Ohtani. I'm excited.
It should be good. It should be good. And both teams have been draining their pitching. These could be some very high scoring affairs, if you know what I mean.
So let's talk about this matchup a little bit because, yeah, Yankee starters didn't really show up and haven't really showed up all playoffs. I think Garrett Cole was the only starter during the playoffs that has gone 7 innings. So the Yankees have had to rely on their bullpen,
Mm.
which was really good to start. But then these are professional baseball players, right? You start to see the same guys come out and pitch for 2 innings a game. You start to know how to handle them and how to battle against them. So the Yankees hit a little bit of a rough patch there in game 2 of the series. And
And
really, game 5 was back and forth and very stressful for fans like us watching.
let me tell you, in these short series, um, if the starting pitcher doesn't go long and you have to use the same relief pitchers night after night, Cleveland was using 8 pitchers, 9 pitchers every game. And eventually, because you're facing major league hitters that can hit, and you see that same pitcher over and over, night after night after night, not you're playing him this week and then you see him again in 3 months, night after night after night, eventually you catch up to him and hit him. And that's what happened. Your starting pitchers have to give you more than 3 or 4 innings.
Listen, I've been tweeting uh, all week. I'd like to see my starters go 7. Then I conceded and I said 6. I knew a complete game was out of question. But it's it's not. It was very stressful, right? Because you've got Luke Weaver, who's come on in the late part of the season to be the closer for the Yankees, had been very dominant. He gets figured out in game 3. Clay Holmes has been inconsistent all season. Pitched really well in the ALDS, pitched really well in the first 2 games of the ALCS, and then he gets rocked around. I will say I was a little bit, and it all works out, right? Like I'm managing from my couch. Didn't love that Aaron Boone took Carlos Rodon out in the 4th inning or the 5th inning with the broken bat single that Cleveland had to tie that game. I thought he was a little quick to go to the bullpen, particularly since all the arms, like these guys have been walking around like lopsided because their arms about to fall off. So I didn't love that, but hey, it all worked out, right?
Yeah, it did. But Rodon was up to close to 90 pitches, high 80s that inning. And the game is different than it was years ago. These guys, I don't know what it is, but and remember, this is October. Now you're late in October. These guys been pitching since February. These guys are exhausted. It's a lot different now. And remember, you're not facing, there's no pitchers that are hitting. It's all hitters. So you constantly, this isn't like old time National League and American League Baseball. You have the DH and you have to go, it's hard getting through these lineups. And these guys can hit.
You know, I respect that it's hard, that the game has changed, but when you're making a couple 100 million a year, I want you to be able to deliver me at least 6 innings on a regular basis. I don't think that's too much to ask for. I will say that the Yankees lineup looked good. You have guys like Labor Torres who are walking and getting on base. Anthony Volpe has really emerged in the playoffs, getting on base, stealing some bases, disrupting, as you mentioned, the
And big
disruption,
hits. Big
big
hits.
hits,
Both of those guys.
but disrupting when you get guys on base, that opposing starting pitcher now has to work a little bit harder to make sure that he's throwing the right pitches, that he doesn't throw one in the dirt that bounces behind the catcher. And that really has affected the game. So, despite guys like Aaron Judge not having his greatest postseason ever, you still have guys getting on base, Juan Soto, Giancarlo Stanton driving them in. Anthony Rizzo had a bunch of big hits. It's been dicey
Verdugo
at
had some
times.
big hits.
Verdugo had some big hits. These guys have also been running the bases like drunks, as John Sterling says. There have been a few errors in the field. This has not been a perfect display of baseball, folks. But the Yankees, regardless of that, are in the World Series for the first time in 15 years.
Well, like I told you before, just before the playoffs started, all of the teams that made the playoffs are kind of equally matched, and anybody could have won the whole thing. It's just how things bounce. There's no one great team this year. And while we're on that subject, I want to talk about the Mets.
We'll make it
The,
quick because their season is over.
well, hey, wait a second. The Mets had a tremendous season. They are one of the most resilient teams I've seen in a long time. They had over 40 something come from behind wins this season, more than any other team in baseball. And they stuck it out and they just ran out of gas at the end. But I'm telling you, they had a tremendous season. They have nothing to be ashamed of.
They absolutely do not. I second that. I was actually very nervous to potentially face the Mets because they've been very hot for the last 2 months, 2.5 months of the season. So I was a bit nervous. Um, But here we are, still nervous because we're playing the Los Angeles Dodgers, as I mentioned, one against one, power against power. You've got Aaron Judge, who had 58 home runs this season, batted 322 with 144 RBIs. You've got Shohei Ohtani, who hit 310, 54 home runs, and 130 RBIs. Um, I would say the Dodgers rotation isn't as strong as the Yankees. And I'll say that loosely because the Yankees rotation hasn't really been that strong during the postseason. But they've got three starters, and then they usually in that fourth game will go with like a bullpen game where you have relievers going 1 to 2 innings in the game. So game one, Garrett Cole will be on the mound for the Yankees. It's TBD right now for the Dodgers. But these are both two really good teams, and this series could go any way. So, Dad, any predictions?
No, I don't make predictions like that. These games are too close. Anybody can win it. The Yankees just have you have to go game by game, inning by inning, pitch by pitch, as we've seen through these other playoff series.
Now, where were you during Game 5 when the Yankees clinched the pennant to advance to the World Series on, what was it, Saturday night?
Saturday night, I was sitting right back there in my lazy boy recliner,
I
on the edge of it, not reclined. I never reclined in that seat.
Listen, I was on the edge of my seat too. I was in a bar around the corner from my apartment. I don't typically like to, in stressful games, go out and be around people, but I had a few friends that were like, "Hey, let's meet up." So I went. I started the first part of the game sitting down. By the fourth inning, I was standing up, pacing. Um, everyone's in there with their Yankee hats. A few too many females in there that looked like they had just gotten their Yankee hat from Urban Outfitters and weren't paying attention to the game. Making it a little bit more crowded than I would like, more crowded than my apartment. But there were also a ton of people that were watching the games. They played it with sound, so it was incredible. Um, we're complaining about this move, we're screaming, we're cheering, we're jumping up and down when Giancarlo Stanton hits the home run to tie the game. By the end of it, we're all jumping up and down, hugging each other. I'll never see these people again, but we were best friends on Saturday night. The DJ ended up playing Frank Sinatra. Everyone's singing New York, New York. Then they played Empire State of Mind, and the place just went nuts. So it was incredible, fun to hang out with people. Also, a little bit cheaper than going to the World Series because it looks like tickets. The cheapest ticket on the market is over $1,000. So I don't know where I'm gonna be during some of the games during the World Series, but it was fun on Saturday night for sure.
I could never watch a game in that kind of setting. I have to be sitting right back there in that Lazy Boy recliner,
Well,
Swebb.
here's my dilemma,
What's
and
the
this is an
dilemma?
embarrassment of riches because this
I think I
weekend
know what you're going to say.
this weekend I'm going to Miami for Miami homecoming. They're playing Florida State. Miami's undefeated. Florida State has one win. I finally decide to go to homecoming for the first time in years. And I'm going to get down there on Friday. That's game one of the World Series. Saturday is the game. The game's at 7 p.m. World Series game starts at 8:08. So, what's turned into was going to be a fun trip catching up with people trying to do all these different things. Like, I'm just trying to figure out, I got to call places ahead to see who's playing the Yankee game with the sound on.
Uh, Places are going to have the World Series game on,
They're going to have it
but
on, but it's not going to, I don't want it to be background. I want it to be the sound on. Like, I would think that there are a lot of transplants from the Northeast that are living in Miami now, that there's got to be some place, but that's my schedule, is essentially doing a few alumni things, catching up with friends. But if you really want to catch up with me, we got to go to a place where the Yankee game's going to be on with sound.
see, Swebb, how do you get yourself into these messes? There is no way that I would be traveling any place while these games are on.
Listen, are we going to call it a mess? Did we think that the Yankees were going to get to the World Series this year?
It it
Not
was a
at
pot.
times. Not
It,
at times. Did I think that the University of Miami would be undefeated this year? No. And there wasn't a time until they started winning and calls started going their way. So here I am now. I've got two teams that are playing really well, fantastic. We were in the World Series. We're undefeated in college football. We have a spot in the college football playoffs if we want it. We're playing Florida State, who sucks. They only have one win this year. I didn't think that all of these things, this is what we call an embarrassment of riches, because I didn't think that all of these good things could happen to me.
Everybody probably feels real sorry for you, Swebb.
It's like first world problems. I don't want to complain, but yeah, like I got to figure it out. So I will follow up with all of you next week once I've had it all figured out. Next week,
Just
figure
take
out when we record, because also they'll be playing games on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday of next, or Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday of next week.
just take some nice pictures of the camp. You're going to be at the campus. You're going to go on the
Of
campus.
course, I'm going on campus.
Take a picture of the food court by that lake. Give me a
Okay.
picture of that.
I don't think anyone needs a picture of the food court, but I'll definitely take pictures of the pool in the center of campus, the lake. There's a bunch of new dorms that have gone
Oh,
up. So the dorm that I lived in my freshman year is completely different and it looks way nicer. So I gotta walk around and probably stop at the bookstore, get a t-shirt that I don't need. There's an athlete, uh, like happy hour cocktail reception on campus. So I'll meet up with a bunch of former teammates. It's gonna be fun, but I need it to end by 7:30 so I can get to my next location, which is somewhere where the TV is on with the sound on. And I can't sit in a hotel watching the game like that. just doesn't feel right. So we're gonna have to figure out all these things. We're gonna have to call ahead to see what we're working with. Um, but man, an embarrassment of riches.
Problems, problems, problems.
Problems. But you know what? Nothing can humble me quite like the New York Jets. So we're not even going to talk about them this week because we've got other things to talk about. We got to talk about the NBA. But there's never a time when all of your teams, if you root for enough teams and enough sports, there's never a time where all of your teams are riding high. You've got the Yankees high, Hurricanes high. For you, Michigan low. Man City high. The Rangers are 4-0-1 high. Jets in the basement. So at least this is how it's all about perspective. It's about staying well rounded. It's about not getting ahead of yourself. It's about still being a nice human being because you've got teams that you root for, that you follow, that you wear their gear that sometimes humble you.
That's why you have to root for a lot of teams in a lot of different sports, and then the law of averages are going to work out.
Exactly. And hey, the New York Liberty, I even watched a little bit of the WNBA. I used to work for them. I used to sell tickets for them. It was probably the hardest thing I've ever had to sell in my whole entire career. They go on and they win the WNBA championship. Now, I'm not going to go to a game, maybe. I don't know. I'm not going to all of a sudden ride the bandwagon because I'm still traumatized from trying to sell tickets to a WNBA game when they were playing at the Prudential Center when they were renovating MSG. But even the New York Liberty, they just won the WNBA championship. So here we go. Like this might be my year. I should go buy a lotto ticket or something. I don't know. I need to go do something because right now life is good.
Not to change the subject, did you take care of that Mickey Mouse problem you had last week?
Yes, I did. So I meant to start off with that, but there's so many good things happening in life that why start it, in a sour mood. So apparently, what I found out is that the mice are gone. There was an exterminator that came in. The mice are gone. There's a lady who lives on the floor who is being evicted. She's not the cleanest. She feeds the pigeons on her
Oh,
patio, and it has led to other visitors finding their way to her home, which happens to be a few doors down from mine. So, luckily, I wasn't the one living on the floor who made the mistake of opening their door and walking away without it being covered and had a few come into their apartment. So, that was someone else on the floor made that mistake. So there were visitors all over the place. Everyone was notified. An exterminator came in, put up traps, blew out the whole place. I bought myself some they're very they avoid minty smells. So I bought some like repellent that smells like mint that I just sprayed upstairs everywhere. So my whole patio smells like a breath mint. But there haven't been visitors since. None of them were in my apartment to start with. Um, so life is good. Thank you for bringing me back down to earth.
anytime. You know I'm good at that, Swebb. I want to keep you humble.
All right, let's talk about something else good that's happening because
What's
the
that?
NBA season starts
Ugh.
Tuesday night. By the time this airs tonight, folks, it'll be starting tonight when everyone's tuning into this. The Knicks are going to Boston to play the Boston Celtics, the defending NBA champions, at 7:30 p.m. Tuesday night. Let's talk about the Knicks. We'll spend the rest of this episode talking about the NBA. The Knicks are going to be good. See, this is like when you start to think about all these things, it really is an embarrassment of riches. I know you feel some type of way about the trade for Karl Anthony Towns. But let's talk through and just give everyone a reminder. So the Knicks last year finished second in the Eastern Conference of the
Mm-hmm.
NBA, finished 50-32. So the
Mm-hmm.
first season in a long time where they had 50 wins, finished second in
Mm-hmm.
the conference. That was not what either of us were predicting when we talked about our predictions in our premiere episode of Dad and Swebb Talk Sports last year. And they end up getting to the second round of the playoffs. Unfortunately, by the time the playoffs hit, the team was depleted. I mean, these guys were injured. I think you even got a phone call to see what you were doing one night to see if you could lace them up. And by the end of the season, they were asking guys selling popcorn in the stands to put on a uniform. So they ended up getting eliminated by the Indiana Pacers. But as the offseason went on, we were excited, right? They had a good draft in terms of getting all these picks, having these picks to make different moves and draft guys in the second round. That also came on the heels of Mikal Bridges coming to the Knicks, being traded by the Nets, which no one would have ever thought that the Nets and Knicks would conduct a trade, being in the same city. And then the Knicks went and traded for Carl Anthony. Well, then Isaiah Hartenstein, as we've talked about, decided to sign with Oklahoma City, leaving us lean at the center position. It came out that Mitchell Robinson was also still hurt and not going to be able to play for the first few months of the season, leaving the Knicks with no center, no viable center for a long period of time. And so the Knicks went and they traded for Carl Anthony Towns, trading away Julius Randle and Dante DiVincenzo. You weren't happy with the trade, Dad, but what are your thoughts going into this season? Because they've had quite a good preseason. I know not everyone plays for long periods of time, but what are your thoughts from what you've seen and going into the season and going into the game Tuesday night?
The whole key in basketball is you have to have talent, which they have talent, but you also have to have chemistry. And when they traded Randall and they traded two of their best offensive players, and they got a real good offensive player back, but it messes up the chemistry because Towns is a different type player than Randall, and Dante was the third best 3-point shooter in the whole league last year.
Well, let me challenge you a little bit on the chemistry because there weren't too many times, with the exception of like a 10-game stretch in January, where we actually saw the whole roster play or a large portion of the roster play together. So there wasn't a ton of time where the team last year actually played at full strength. So, we can talk about chemistry. Yes, I think that there's Dante DiVincenzo stepped up, right? OG Anunoby was hurt. Um, they traded away RJ Barrett and Emmanuel quickly to start the season. So he was able to get more playing time than he originally was slated to. Um, but that chemistry, I get what you're saying, that you want to make sure that the team can run together. But there weren't too many times where we saw them at full strength last year.
In January, when we did see them at full strength, I think they were 12-2 that month. They were blowing teams out. I mean, real good teams like Denver, like Philadelphia, in Philadelphia. They were blowing teams out by 30 points. They were like a well-oiled machine. And then I believe it was January 27th, right at the end of the month, Julius Randle dislocates his shoulder. And I think that same night, Robinson hurt his ankle, had to have surgery. He was out for months. And then Randle never came back. But the difference with that team, the reason why they were still able to win 50 games and still make it to the second round, because they had guys on their bench that were really starting caliber players. Dante wasn't really a bench player. He was really a starter on good teams. And when he came into the lineup, he was able to score 20, 25, 30 points some nights. When Hart came into the lineup, he was able to play and start and do well, rebounding. And when Hartenstein came into the lineup, he was a starting caliber player. He's the starting center for Oklahoma City, one of the best teams in the West
Well,
now.
now he is out with an injury. So injuries happen, right? But I would argue that the sample size, while it was a great sample in January 2024, it was a small sample size. Not to say that they couldn't have duplicated that and kept that going, I think that's what everyone was hoping for, and I think that's why a lot of fans were really sad to see Julius Randle and Dante DiVincenzo go. But I the more and more that I watching, and obviously will gonna find the time to be watching these games one way or another. The home opener is the same time as the World Series while I'm in Miami. Um, but I think that this team is going to be really good.
I
And
hope so,
I
Swim.
think Carl Anthony Towns also brings he brings offense at the center position, which they don't have with Mitchell Robinson. Isaiah Hartenstein is a better offensive player, but um, Carl Anthony Towns now takes a little bit of pressure off these guards. I think that there'll be a lot more open looks because you've got guys closing in on Carl Anthony Towns when he has the ball. He's the guy who averaged, what did he average? 28, 21.8 points per game last year, 8.3 rebounds a game, 3 assists a game. So he's an all-star, right?
Yeah, he's an all-star.
So you're going from Mitchell Robinson, and granted, he only played 31 games in the regular season. He was averaging 5 points a game. Isaiah Hartenstein was around 8 or 9 points a game. So now between those two, you've got a guy who's averaging 22 points a game and is still very young. When we look at the rest of the roster, like we know we're going to be fine with Jalen Brunson. He averaged 28.7 points per game, 6.7 assists, 3 rebounds a game. Went crazy in the playoffs, averaging 32.4 points per game. Um, Mikal Bridges, another new guy that we haven't really talked about too much. He averaged 19.6 points per game last season, 3.6 assists a game. And now, if you think about this too, uh, Mikal Bridges 37% 3 point field 3 point field goal percentage, and Jalen Brunson shot 40% from the three. So, and OG Ananobi we know can hit those corner threes. So when you start to really look at this lineup, they are going to be a really good team. And I think what's going to happen is similarly to what happened when Deuce McBride got more playing time. Maybe you see some young guys that haven't been in the league for a long time, or maybe that are rookies that step up because they're given the opportunity to provide valuable minutes when they come off the bench.
That's true. You're right. I hope so. I hope so.
And I think
I just don't have a warm and cuddly feeling yet. Maybe in a month from now, I will.
well, we'll check back to see if you're warm and cuddly in a month. I sure hope that you are, because you can be a little grouchy when you're not.
Come on, you know me better than that, Swebb.
Picture this, folks. It's like when he's really hungry and he has to eat right then and there, almost like a toddler or a baby that's like crying because they want food. That's dad. So let's hope, let's pray.
Wait a second. Wait a second.
Let's
That's
pray that
when
he
you.
doesn't, that he's not grouchy and that he's warm and cuddly a month into the Knicks season.
That's the only time I get grouchy when you have me walking around on some gallivanting around on something. And when are we stopping to eat? Where are we stopping to eat? Then you take me into some dopey restaurant where there's carrots and pretzels
Listen,
instead of the kind of restaurant I like going to, the Greasy Spoon.
you see how these guys train in the off season to be able to perform in the regular season, to be able to perform in the postseason.
Yeah.
You see what happens with a good spring training for some of these Yankees players. You see what happens for a good uh, summer league and good off-season workouts for the Knicks.
Yes,
When
I
it's
know.
go time, they're ready to go. So what you need to be doing is you need to be training for when you see me that I'm not going to make you walk 5 miles, but
Boy.
1 mile, not consecutively, I think you could do.
But what's the purpose in that, Swebb?
I believe in you. Do you believe in yourself? Do you believe in yourself?
Yes, Swebb.
Okay. Sometimes if we're in downtown Charleston, you can't park right in front of the establishment that you're going to eat in. Sometimes you want to see a few shops too before your table's ready. Oh,
Who wants to see a few shops?
that's
Not
the
me.
same thing in New York City. You can't park in front of every place that you go to. You got to get out and you got to walk. I walk I walk about 4/10 of a mile to the bus stop every day, and I walk about 4/10 home from the bus, not to mention the 3.5 that I run in the morning. On a regular day when I haven't done a single run, I probably have walked about 2.5 miles,
Oh man,
going to get
that's
lunch, maybe running an errand, whatever it might be. That's just life.
that's life. Not my life, Swim.
Well, let's talk about some predictions for this season. How many wins do you think that the Knicks will have this season?
I'll be happy if they can get 50 wins.
So you think that they're going to have the same result that they had last season?
Yeah, I'll be happy with that under the circumstances.
You
Remember,
don't
it
think
takes
that they're
time
any
to melt.
better?
It takes. They could be better. They could be worse. But even if they're better, it still takes time to. They got two new players in the starting rotation in the starting lineup, so it takes time to get guys fixed. And do you remember your brother's team, high school team, when he was in a freshman? They had the
No.
conglomeration.
It's like 25 years ago. No.
They had a whole conglomeration of guys. The chemistry wasn't good. They didn't make the playoffs. The next year, they they pretty much had the same lineup. Guys, a little more experience his sophomore year. They make the playoffs. They go to the playoffs.
I'm going to say
And by the third
54
year,
wins. I'm going to say 54
okay.
wins. Here's why. Because last year, yes, we have a few new guys in the rotation, but last year, most of the roster was hurt for long periods of time. Some of your key players were hurt for long periods of time. Julius
Hmm.
Randle, OG Ananobi, Mitch Rob. Can you stop moving around? No more sips of coffee. Like we're gonna be done in 5 minutes.
You don't want me to fall asleep, do you, Sweb?
Look alive. This is a great
Oh,
week to be a Knicks fan and a Yankee fan. Act like you want to be here. So when you think about it now, you've got guys who are healthy. I think that they've got 54 wins in them. And I think I'm being a little bit conservative with it. I don't think they're a 60-win team, but I think that they can get to 54 because I think that they're better than they were last year. They're younger and healthier. Now, last year, they got eliminated in the second round. Where do you think that they're going to finish in the East? Let's start there before we get to the playoffs.
let's say third.
Third, okay. Who do you have finishing ahead of them?
Boston and Milwaukee. Philadelphia has a good team, but they have guys hurt already. Paul George is hurt. Don't know when he's coming back. Embiid already said he's not playing back-to-back games because of his knees. Meanwhile, he was on the Olympic team this summer. I don't know why you go and you play on the Olympic team, and then you're making 50-something million a year to play for your regular team, and now you can't play all the time for your regular team. But you just had to go and play on the Olympic team, which didn't need him.
That's a very fair assessment. I think that they could still finish second. I think Boston is a better team. I think Philly is definitely going to be injured. Milwaukee, I don't know. They didn't show me a ton. They kind of crashed out of the playoffs. They're always a good and very competitive team. Obviously, you can't count them out, but I think that
And
the
they
Knicks are better.
they have a lot of age on that team. Lillard is up there in age. Lopez is up there in age. Middleton has been hurt a lot the last few years. He's up there in age. They're not the same team that they were.
So I think that they finished second behind the Celtics. Now, the Knicks were eliminated in the second round of the playoffs last year to the Indiana Pacers. And the Indiana Pacers, I think, will be up there. We didn't talk about them, but I think the
Yeah.
Knicks are a better team than them when healthy and with this roster. Um, where do you think that they will? How far do you think they'll get in the playoffs?
I think they could go to the finals if they get themselves together. If they pick up a little another player or two at the trade deadline, they could go. They could get to the finals.
The
You
NBA
know they're going
finals.
to make NBA finals. You know they're going to make a trade somewhere in during the season. They're going to pick up somebody because they have a great general manager. Even though I'm not happy with the trade that he made.
I'm saying NBA Finals as well. Now, how many All-Stars do you think this team will have?
How many? Two.
Two. Who?
Brunson and Towns.
All right. And who do you think is going to be the NBA MVP?
Um, NBA MVP. Oklahoma City kid, Shea Gilgris Alexander.
Okay, SGA. Interesting choice. All right. Um, I don't know. I might go Anthony Edwards.
Remember, that team is loaded. That Minnesota team is loaded, loaded. So they got Randall, they got Dante, they got Edwards, they got Colbert, they have Naz Reid, they have a few guys coming in off the bench. So the scoring is going to, if they do it right, the scoring is going to be split up a lot.
Wouldn't that be something if Minnesota and the Knicks meet in the NBA Finals?
Very easily could happen.
I think so too.
And very easily Minnesota could win the whole thing because I think right now they're the best team in the whole NBA.
I think Oklahoma City is probably their toughest
Yeah. Yep.
competition.
Yep.
Um, we know that, and you can never count Denver out. But I think this year we're gonna see Minnesota potentially get to the NBA Finals against the Knicks, and it's gonna be drama everywhere.
I hope so. That'd be a scary situation because I wouldn't want to have to be facing Dante and Randall. They're already upset about the trade that they were traded from New York. They loved it here. Okay, they're upset. They almost had a. They, there was almost fisticuffs after the exhibition
Yeah,
game in Madison Square Garden the other day with Dante and Brunson's father. Okay, you don't want to face teams that have an extra edge
of course
to
not. But
beat you
I
in the
think Minnesota is the
playoffs.
best team in the West, so I can't. I don't see any other team coming out of the West right now. But we'll
It can
see.
always be. It can always be an upset, and there's always
There
injury. You
could
never know
be.
what's going to happen.
There could be. But look at the Celtics. They were the clear favorites. They ended up winning the whole thing. So you
Yeah.
just never know. But either way, it's going to be really exciting because our expectations are higher, which sometimes can be a little bit dangerous because you can end up being disappointed. But I actually am really excited for this season. I'm really excited to see this team play. I think that they're going to put on a show all season. We've got the World Series starting this week. We've got Miami, Florida State. We've got That's all we really need to talk about because Michigan's no good. We're not even we've moved on from the NFL season. We'll talk about it when there are less important things and games going on. But man, this is going to be an incredible week. Are you excited, Dad?
Yeah. Hey, Swebb, I'm excited like this every week because I'm always watching action. There's action every week, Swebb. There's
Wow.
action every week. And if there's nothing on, do you know I've turned to ESPNU and watched women's college water polo games
I've
on a
watched women's
Sunday night
college
at 10.
volleyball, but I've already said that I'm a fan, so I try and watch it all, but there aren't even enough hours in the day and night, and now we're talking about, like, big games happening all at the same time and being at
Right.
one while another one's happening. I'm a little stressed, but I'm excited. Dad, do you
Yes.
wanna leave us with a tip of the week?
Yeah. You know what? Back in May, I said this about the Mets. If they let some of these younger players that they have a few real good young players. Some of them aren't the best defensive players. Some of them are a little sloppy. But if they just let them play every day and get experience, by the end of the year, these guys will have something. By next year, you'll be set up real nice. If the Mets just hang in there, just tread water. They did good against the Braves this past week. They won a 2 of 3 in Atlanta. They have a shot to compete in the National League East. And I was only partially right. the Mets had a tremendous season. And as much as I say, stick with your team, have faith, don't write your team off, keep believing in your team, I told Met fans to just start rebuilding for next year in May. Now, I was right about some other things. I told them to leave Lindor alone because they were getting ready to string the guy up. And I told him to leave Lindor alone. He's one of the best players in baseball, and leave him alone. And he's going to wind up, he got hot at the end of May and carried it right through. He's going to be in the top 2 or 3 in MVP voting. Okay. So Met fans had a great season. You have a great GM, and you have a lot of good stuff to look forward to. He has a lot of decisions to make this winter because there's a lot of older players that are free agents. But I think that
So what's the
Stearns,
tip here? What's the tip?
the tip is I was wrong, and you know what? Stick to your guns with your team, and keep believing in your team. That's the tip of the week, Swebb.
Well, thank you for that, Dad. That
And when you're wrong, just admit you're wrong and keep moving on.
I'm going to take that specific part of the tip and replay that over and over again. You better believe it.
Oh, wait, let's burn that tape.
So that concludes this week's episode of Dad and Swebb Talk Sports. Thank you for tuning in. Be sure to follow us at Dad and Swebb on Instagram and X, and subscribe on YouTube and Rumble. And share this episode with a friend.
So
Go
long.
Knicks. Go Yankees. We'll see you next week.
So long.
Thank you for tuning in to Dad and Swebb Talk Sports, the show where we cover all of our favorite sports moments from the past week. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube and Rumble, and follow us at Dad and Swebb on Instagram and X. See you next week.